Well, here's a goof that I made. I got this movie called A Lizard in Woman's Skin, but instead of getting the English translation, I got the Italian version. So I was thinking, is this going to play on my Blu ray player? Surprisingly, it does. Don't ask me how, but I'm like, well, okay then. 1971. It's got many different versions here. This is directed by Lucio Fulci, the godfather of gore himself, and an interesting giallo one. A murder was committed. No one knows who. This was next door. And we have our heroine, quote unquote, Sarah Hammond, who has been experiencing hallucinations, vivid dreams of her committing some type of murder. And she's wondering exactly what's going on. So what follows is a police procedural slash LSD style movie that is very interesting. And I'm looking at this movie like, hey, this is actually really cool and really interesting. I'm liking this plot. It's like, at first they're asking some people saying, hey, if you happen to know anything about what's going on, please let us know. We're just looking for the information. And lo and behold, we happen to see our bougie heroine, Heroine, as she is, suffering from all these delusions and everything, and you're just wondering, is there something more deep going on within here? Like, what is this? What could possibly be happening? But we also get another side of the story with the cops and the public defenders and everything else as they try and figure out what's going on. With the three items that were left in the room, a letter opener, which was used to perform the stabbing, the scarf, and a jacket. And it's like, okay, interesting. We have this, but and the fingerprints too. So we get to see some behind the scenes work of it. Of course, obviously there's an F ton of paperwork going on. So it's like they bring in the fingerprints to see to see who's like, do these match? Who could be the suspect possibly be? The motives and everything else. You've seen this time and time again, but hearing it in Italian, I guess we can kind of see the Italians take it over. It's pretty interesting. And it's like eventually putting the clues together, getting different suspects and everything else, and eventually they do manage to find this. Like during the murder was revealed, like there are two hippies that kind of play a central part, which is a counterculture. We'll get to that in a minute. Oh, like could they have seen everything, and we get to see their style of living, LSD, and the woman and the female hippie who coats daggers in red and blue and throws them against walls, claiming that's her style of art, which maybe it could be like oxygenated and deoxygenated blood symbolism right there, if you want to go into that. But yeah, ultimately, it's like, through many twists and turns of like saying, hey, it's like, we're going to arrest you, Carol, because that was your stuff. Your fingerprints were found over, so they held her like in I don't know, jail, like a prison or holding place, whatever. Eventually, they find her guilty or whatever, and they, reason of insanity, they put her to a mental institution, which was interesting to see. But yeah, she eventually gets followed by the male hippie, which in a rather intense scene of going through like some abandoned, I don't know, a factory or something like that. It was on the ground, and it was intense. I will say that. It was definitely a scene where I'm just thinking, is she going to escape? Is she not? Like, what are we seeing here? Eventually, the hippie gets arrested and gets spun around. He's getting interrogated with like bright lights and everything. He like, I think he gets eliminated. Ultimately, it is revealed through like piecing together everything that it was Carol Hammond who is having an affair with the victim. And I think that, yeah, what was it? she did that, but when she saw the two hippies, she was like, "Oh crap!" So her mind went into such a state that ultimately she has these dreams. The hippies were on LSD, so they didn't see anything. But I think Carol's also on LSD anyway. Ultimately, she gets taken into a car. Anyway, that is a plot. There's a lot of twists and turns in these giallo styles. Obviously, the style here is the colors. Colors used to represent, like, when one is on Lucy in the Sky with diamonds. It's like, yeah, you could see anything. Even the male hippie said, yeah, I could see a lizard in woman's skin. It was beautiful. And the detectives say, no, that sounds disgusting. So obviously they don't really go into depth about the hippie culture, but you can kind of you could pretty much tell what's going on. So yeah, obviously the scenes are like about 20 minutes in of like when there's an orgy, when there's like an orgy happening, and there's a like when she's having like a freak out over, she's having an episode when her mind starts to um have certain things happen. It's just like you just look at this and you can see the true paranoia that's going on within here, and it's just absolutely insane. Probably the most famous scene is there when, like, like I mentioned, there was that chase going on. That's probably like the second most famous scene of just like running and how she's very free because there's a guy with a freaking knife who actually manages to stab her, the hippie again. And when they're going through the underground, you're like, how she's trying to get across the rocks. Eventually, they make their way into the factory, and the chase that just goes on. It's something else. So, of course, about 57 minutes in, she, during one of her episodes, walks inside and sees a whole bunch of like dogs that were getting vivisectioned, but you could see all their viscera and everything. It was truly disgusting. I'm just looking at them like, what the frigid air? Obviously, they were props and they had the full ARs put the sound in, but it was just disturbing to look at. They kind of linger on it too. I'm just like, oof. So yeah, freaking intense movie. It is a little slow in certain parts when they're talking, when the investigators are talking and everything. I'm like, okay, come on, get to something. About 40 minutes. I'd say like 30 to 45 minutes, and I did feel a little bored. And I'm just like, it was just leading up to some of the more interesting scenes. So I'm just like, okay, obviously everything's so bloody and just so interesting. It's like, you have the clash of the lifestyles of the wealthy bourgeois living that Carol Hammond has versus her neighbor who's living a more, I guess you could say, kind of middle class life, counterculture. And she's trying to she thinks she's doesn't like that lifestyle, so that affair going on. Of course, obviously, in order to display the psychosis and everything else, it's like, hey, let's have the camera being like being disorientated in order to leave the audience like feeling the paranoia that Carol is, which I'll admit, you really can tell that she is feeling it. Sometimes you have to do the tricks. You have to have the right backgrounds. There's some like good camera angles here to make you feel disorientated. And I'm just looking at it. I'm just like, jeez, oh Pete. It's like we get some nice wide shots. We get the kinetic energy, and ultimately everything does work out here. It's like you're just wondering who really was it? Who was the whodunit in this giallo / police procedural? So yeah, I liked it. But yeah, this movie is definitely pretty interesting. It's definitely not for everyone, especially like when you see the fake dogs. In fact, Lucio Fulci was actually taken to court, and he would have gotten 2 years for animal abuse, whatever, had not like the special effects artists themselves come in and displayed exactly how it was done. So yeah, Fulci managed to avoid 2 years in prison. But it's like you yeah, that's pretty effing insane if you ask me. But yeah, despite everything I'm saying, it's like This movie is pretty dang good. This is his more, I guess you could say, artistic side of a movie with the camera angles, the colors, and the takes, and the disorientating and everything, which really does make it for like, yeah, there's a little bit of gore, especially with one of the deceased bodies there, but it doesn't get like with Zombie or some of his later works. So yeah, if you ever get the chance, I do actually recommend that you watch A Lizard in Woman's Skin.